Good morning, Professor. Our study is titled The Effect of Inflation on Employment. This study examines the relationship between inflation and unemployment in the United States from 1995 to 2024. Chapter 1. This chapter introduces the background, problems, objectives, and literature of our study. We focus on the Phillips curve framework and examine whether it still explains the inflation-unemployment relationship in recent decades. Research background and significance. The Phillips curve describes the relationship between inflation and unemployment and has long guided macroeconomic policy decisions. Maintaining price stability and full employment is the Federal Reserve's dual mandate. However, recent U.S. economic shocks challenge this traditional relationship, raising questions about this continued validity. Problem statement: misinflation. The first problem is the misinflation puzzle. After 2010, U.S. unemployment declined sharply, but inflation remained below the 2% target. The traditional Phillips curve failed to explain this pattern. Problem statement: flattening curve. The second problem is the flattening curve phenomenon. Inflation responds less to changes in unemployment. As a result, large labor market changes produce smaller inflation effects. Research objectives. Based on these problems, this study aims to test the expectations augmented Phillips curve in the United States. We use annual data from 1995 to 2024, examine robustness using econometric diagnostics, and interpret the results under modern theoretical debates. Literature review. The literature review covers 4 main areas. This includes the original Phillips curve and policy transfer office, and expectations augmented Phillips curve and Najul, the new Keynesian framework, and empirical evidence from the United States.
Let's start with part 2, methodology and results. There are 3 contents here: data, model specification, empirical findings. We use annual U.S. data from 1995 to 2024, 30 observations, unemployment rate and CPI inflation rate. Inflation measured by CPI growth rate. Data source is World Bank. Then the data overview, scatter plot. Scatter plot shows no clear negative correlation. Relationship appears unstable over time. Then here is normality test of inflation rate. The p-value is close to 0, so we reject the assumption of normal distribution. This result is mainly caused by extreme inflation values, especially during recent years like the post-COVID period. However, this does not invalidate our regression results, because OLS is still reliable with this sample size. Then we use an expectations augmented Phillips curve. This means current inflation depends on past inflation and current unemployment. Lagging inflation is used as a proxy for expected inflation. This model better reflects model economic theory. Before regression, we test stationarily use the ADF test. The result shows that inflation and unemployment are non-stationary in their level 4. After first differentiation, both variables become stationary. This confirms that our regression analysis is valid and not spurious. The regression results, the unemployment coefficient is negative, which is consistent with the Phillips curve theory. However, This coefficient is not stationarily significant. This means unemployment has only a vague effect on inflation. The R-squared value is about 0.34, so the model explains only part of inflation change. We also conduct diagnostic tests to check the reliability of the model. First, the autocorrelation test shows no series correlation. Second, the Y test shows no heteroscedasticity. So overall, the models does satisfy the base assumption of OLS regression. Then the result interpretation. Philip curve does not fully explain U.S. data. Inflation influenced by multiple economic factors. Simple inflation unemployment trade-off is insufficient.
To conclude, from 1995 to 2024, the relationship between inflation and unemployment, the United States is weak and unstable. The traditional Phillips curve does not fully fit the U.S. economic reality. Therefore, policymakers should be cautious. They should not rely only on unemployment data when making decisions. Instead, they should use multiple indicators, promote sustainable goals, and manage inflation expectations carefully. That's all for my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.